Captain's Log, number 20. I have moved to Navigation Bay 7, the observation deck above the Manticore's secondary guidance array, not because it is safe here, but because it has the largest unobstructed viewport on the ship. And tonight, I needed to see the stars, not for comfort. I gave up on comfort approximately 6 weeks ago, give or take the days I can no longer reliably count. I needed to see them because of what I found this morning in the sealed archive compartment behind the navigation bay's secondary processor rack. A compartment that, according to the Manticore's official manifest, does not exist. A compartment that someone went to considerable trouble to weld shut from the inside, using a welding tool that is no longer aboard this vessel, which means whoever sealed it did so before leaving the ship, or before being removed from it. Inside the compartment, I found a single data slate, cracked along one corner, battery at 11%, but still readable, and on that data slate was a map. Not a navigation chart, not a star map in any conventional sense, something older than our mapping conventions. Something drawn by hand in a digital stylus across 417 individual frames, each one a layer on top of the last, each one adding something the previous frame did not contain. The person who made this map spent a very long time making it, and at the bottom of the final frame, in small, precise handwriting that shook slightly at the letters, was a name: Dr. Elara Voss, Chief Navigation Officer, Manticore Mission, Original Crew Complement. She was listed in the mission files as deceased, airlock malfunction, approximately 14 months before I came aboard. I am looking at the stars through the viewport right now, and I am trying to reconcile two things simultaneously. The first thing is the scientific, rational part of my mind, the part that spent 22 years being trained to observe and measure and draw conclusions only from verifiable data. That part of my mind is telling me that what Dr. Voss drew on that slate, it is impossible, that the geometry she mapped does not correspond to any coordinate system mathematics recognizes, that the shapes she traced at the outer edges of the final frame are not stars. The second thing is the part of my mind that has been awake in these corridors for 18 months now, the part that has heard the sounds in the walls, the part that has watched the readings from the forward array and understood what they actually mean. That part of my mind is telling me something different. It is telling me that Dr. Voss did not make a map of space. She made a map of what space is hiding, and those are not the same thing. Not remotely. Let me start from the beginning, because the beginning matters. The beginning is the reason none of what comes after makes any sense without it. When I was 7 years old, my father took me to a planetarium in the city where we lived. It was an old building. The dome was slightly water-stained at one edge. The projector was a machine from the 1970s that made a low, warm mechanical hum when it ran, and that turned off the lights, and the stars appeared on the dome above us, and my father put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Everything you can see has a name, and everything with a name has a story, and the stories are old enough to make everything that has ever happened to us feel, by comparison, like a single breath." I became a scientist because of that planetarium, because of the specific quality of awe I felt in that domed room at the age of 7. Because I wanted to spend my life getting closer to the stories that were old enough to make human history feel like a breath. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what I felt this morning when I looked at the first frame of Dr. Voss's map. Frame 1 shows the solar system, conventional, accurate, labeled with standard nomenclature, exactly what you would expect from a chief navigation officer cataloging known space. Frame 2 adds something outside the heliopause, the boundary where the sun's influence ends and interstellar space begins, a series of structures, not natural formations. Not the kind of thing that gravitational physics produces, geometric, regular, spaced with a precision that implies deliberate placement. In the margins of frame 2, Dr. Voss has written 3 words. They were always here. Frame 3 zooms out, further than our best deep field observations, further than the edge of our observable universe as currently mapped. And in the space beyond that edge, in the region that our instruments cannot reach and our mathematics can only gesture toward in theoretical terms, Dr. Voss has drawn something. It takes up the entire frame, and it is not a structure, it is not a formation, it is a face, not metaphorically, not as an artistic impression or a symbolic representation, a face looking in. The margin note on frame 3 reads, "The observable universe is not a limit. It is a window, and something has always been watching through it." I put the slate down at that point. I sat in the dark of the archive compartment for what I estimate was approximately 40 minutes, and then I picked it up again, because the alternative to knowing is ignorance. And I have learned at considerable personal cost that ignorance is not protection. It never was. It was always just a delay. The data slate's battery reached 8% by the time I got to frame 100. I transferred the files to the Manticore's secondary memory core, the one that is not networked to any other system aboard this ship. The one I have been using as a private archive since I understood that privacy on this vessel was not guaranteed by design. And then I read everything, all 417 frames, all the margin notes, all the timestamps. Dr. Lilara Voss began making this map approximately 3 weeks into the original Manticore mission. She began it because of an anomaly in the navigation data. A small one. The kind of thing that most navigators would flag, log, and attribute to sensor calibration drift. Consistent, repeatable, inexplicable offset between where the Manticore's instruments calculated we were, and where, based on the stars visible through the viewports, we actually were. The difference was small, approximately 0.03 degrees of arc. Consistent across every measurement, every day, every location, the same offset, always in the same direction. Voss was not the kind of person who attributes consistent, repeatable anomalies to sensor drift. She was, by every account in her personnel file, by every note in her personal logs, which I found in a secondary partition of the same slate, a methodical and obsessive tracker of discrepancies. She had spent her career finding the things that did not fit, and in every case prior to the Manticore mission, the things that did not fit had an explanation, a prosaic one, a human one, miscalibration, an atmospheric interference, a rounding error propagated across generations of copied data. She expected this anomaly to have an explanation like that. She expected to find a simple answer and close the query and move on to the next navigation calculation. Instead, she found something that she describes in frame 67's margin note as the oldest error in recorded human history. I will try to explain this carefully, because the implication is staggering in a way that is easy to say but difficult to actually feel. And I want you to feel it. Our maps of the night sky, our star charts, the coordinate systems we use to navigate space, are built on top of older maps, generations of older maps. The modern star atlas is descended from 18th century charts, which are descended from Arab astronomical tables of the 9th century, which are descended from Hellenistic recalculations of the 2nd century, which are descended in turn from Babylonian star catalogues that are over 3 bytes. 1,000 years old. Each generation of astronomers took what came before, corrected for their better instruments and methods, and built forward. This is the normal process of science. This is how knowledge accumulates. But Dr. Voss found something in that chain of inheritance that does not belong to the normal process, a correction that appears in the historical record around 400 years ago. In the astronomical tables produced by a group of scholars working under the patronage of a specific, powerful, and extremely secretive European institution around the year 1630, a correction was made to the foundational coordinate grid, a small one, approximately 0.03 degrees of arc, in the margin of frame 72. Dr. Voss writes, "They moved the map, not because the original map was wrong, because the original map was right, and what it was pointing at was something they needed us not to look at." I'm going to tell you what the original coordinates point toward. Before I do, I need you to understand something about the nature of looking at the sky. When you look at a star, you are not seeing the star as it is. You are seeing light that left that star years ago, decades ago, centuries. Sometimes, the further the star, the older the light. When you look at the most distant objects our instruments can detect, the oldest galaxies at the edge of the observable universe, you are seeing light that has been traveling for approximately 13 billion years. You are, in a very literal sense, looking at the past. The night sky is a time machine, and there is a direction, a very specific point in the sky that corresponds, if you trace the geometry back through the centuries and correct for the deliberate offset introduced in 1630, to something that our modern charts simply label as a void, an area of anomalously low stellar density, an emptiness where the models predict there should be matter, a gap. Astronomers have a name for it. They call it the cold spot, a region of the cosmic microwave background that is inexplicably, stubbornly, inconsistently empty, in a way that several theoretical models have suggested might indicate a bubble, a region where our universe's physics thin out, where the boundary between what is inside and what is outside becomes, in measurable ways, less definite. The original star maps, the ones before 1630, do not show a void at those coordinates. They show something at those coordinates. They show it consistently, across multiple independent traditions, across multiple centuries of careful observation. They show a structure, vast, dark, structured object, at the precise location where our current maps show only emptiness. And in the margin of frame 103, Dr. Voss writes 7 words. It was there, and then it moved. She spent the next 4 months of the mission trying to find it, using instruments more sensitive than anything that existed in 1630, using methods that the correction in the historical record was specifically designed to make unnecessary, reorienting the Manticore's deepest range sensors toward the original coordinates and simply looking. And in frame 281, halfway through her map, by this point clearly obsessed in a way that her personal logs describe with the specific clarity of someone who knows they are becoming obsessed and cannot stop, she found it. Not where the original map said it was, somewhere else, somewhere closer, much closer, and moving. She writes in the margin of frame 281, "It is not lost. It has been approaching for 400 years, at a speed our models would have said was impossible. It will arrive." The timestamp on frame 281 corresponds to a date that, by my calculation, was approximately 27 months before this recording. The next margin note on frame 282 reads only, "I have to show this to someone. I 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 have to show this to someone. The next recorded timestamp is 3 days later, and after that, there are no more margin notes, only the map. The map continuing to be filled in, frame by frame, with increasing precision and decreasing handwriting stability, until frame 417, for the final frame, the face, looking in, and below it, in letters so small, I had to magnify the display to read them. They have always known we were here. The map was not hidden to protect us from them. The map was hidden because they asked for it to be. They needed time. They needed us not to look until they were ready to be seen. I think the time is almost up. I have been sitting with this information for 11 hours now. I want to tell you what I have done with those 11 hours. Not because the specific sequence of my actions matters in itself, but because the process of working through this is the only thing I have to offer you. I cannot stop what is coming. I have made my peace with that. What I can do is think clearly about what it means, and share that thinking with whoever is receiving these transmissions, which, based on the pattern of signal acknowledgements, I have been detecting on the last frequency band over the past several weeks, is more people than I would have expected. Someone is out there. Multiple someones listening. I do not know who you are. I do not know where you are. I do not know what your circumstances are, or how much you already know, or what you are planning to do with what I send you, but you are listening. And that means something to me that I find difficult to articulate precisely. It means the antenna is still pointing somewhere. It means the signal has not been fully captured. The first thing I did with the 11 hours was verify Dr. Voss's mathematics. This took approximately 4 hours. Her work is correct. Not just broadly, approximately correct. Precisely, verifiably, independently, reproducible, correct. The offset in the historical record is real. The trajectory of the object she identified is calculable. The current position of that object, extrapolated from her measurements and corrected for the time that has passed since her final entry, is consistent with the position of the structured object that the Manticore's forward array has been measuring for the past several months. The thing off our port bow. The thing I have been calling the door. Dr. Voss found it first. She calculated its arrival before anyone else on this ship understood there was anything to calculate. And then she died in an airlock malfunction 14 months before I came aboard. I am not going to say explicitly what I believe happened to Dr. Voss. I think the sequence of events speaks clearly enough. She found the map. She said she needed to show it to someone. 3 days later, the notes stopped. The map continued to be completed in increasingly unsteady handwriting until it was finished. Then the slate was sealed inside a compartment that the manifest does not record. Then the Dr. Voss died in an airlock malfunction. I will let you draw your own conclusions. The second thing I did with the 11 hours was go back to the Manticore protocol document, the classified file I found months ago in the restricted partition of the ship's memory core. I have read it many times, but I read it again tonight with different eyes. With the eyes of someone who has just seen Dr. Voss's map, and I found something I had missed in every previous reading. A section near the end, in a subsection labeled in the dry administrative language for the shadow government's internal documentation, historical mitigation records. The section describes, in 3 paragraphs of the most deliberately opaque, bureaucratic language I have ever encountered, a pattern, a recurring historical pattern, across multiple cultures, across multiple centuries, across the full span of recorded human civilization, of individuals who independently arrived at the same coordinates, who looked at the same point in the sky, who, without access to each other's work, without knowledge of the other's existence, drew the same thing at those coordinates, not a void, something vast, something watching. The document calls them the cartographers. It notes that the cartographers have appeared with increasing frequency over the past 4 centuries. It notes that each cartographer, upon completing their map, attempted to share what they had found. It notes, in language so dry it almost conceals the horror of what it is describing, that each cartographer was, and I am reading this word for word now, because the euphemism deserves to be heard in full, who moved from the information environment prior to broad dissemination. Removed from the information environment. That is the phrase the shadow government uses for a process that I believe has been ending the lives of scientists and scholars and stargazers for 400 years. Everyone who looked at the right coordinates. Everyone who corrected for the error that was introduced in 1630. Everyone who found the object and tried to tell someone, remove from the information environment. Lara Voss was a cartographer. I believe I know of at least 2 others. Their names appear in the historical records I have been able to access through the Manticore's archive. Names attached to astronomical papers that were published and then quietly withdrawn. Names attached to careers that ended abruptly and without stated cause. Names attached to lives that stopped in the middle of productive decades without public explanation. The Manticore Protocol document estimates that there have been approximately 300 cartographers over the past 4 centuries, 300 people who found the map on their own, 300 people who understood what was in the sky, 300 people who died before they could tell anyone, and now the object is here. Now it is too close to hide. Now the blue beam cascade is being prepared to make its arrival look like something other than what it is. And the question I have been sitting with for the remaining hours of this 11-hour process is this: why now? Why has the approach taken 400 years? Why introduce a correction in 1630 and then spend 4 centuries slowly closing the distance? What has changed between the 16th century and now that makes our moment the right moment for the arrival? And I think I know the answer. I think I knew it somewhere before I had the words for it. But Dr. Voss's map made it concrete, made it visible, made it something I can look at directly instead of sensing at the edges of my understanding. The answer is population. In 1630, the human population of Earth was approximately 500 million people. Today, it is 8 billion. The difference is not just a number. The difference is the scale of the signal, the combined resonance of 8 billion conscious minds, each producing the specific frequency of belief and hope and faith and meaning, is 16 times larger than the signal available in 1630. They have been waiting for the harvest to mature. They have been patient with a patience that makes geological time feel impulsive. And now the field is full, and the reaping is here. I want to pause here and address something. I know how this sounds. I have been in deep space for a long time. I have been under considerable psychological pressure for the full duration of this mission. I have heard things in the walls of this ship that I cannot explain. I have seen things through the viewports that contradict my training and my models and my foundational understanding of how reality is structured. It would be understandable, entirely understandable, to categorize everything I am telling you as the output of a mind under extreme stress, a mind seeking patterns, mind constructing narratives to impose meaning on an experience that has been, by any reasonable measure, shattering. I cannot prove to you that I am not that. I cannot stand outside my own perception and evaluate it from a neutral position. What I can tell you is that Dr. Voss's mathematics are independently verifiable. The historical record of the offset in our star charts is independently verifiable. The pattern of individuals identified in the Manticore protocol document as cartographers corresponds, in every case I have been able to check, to real historical figures whose careers and lives ended in the ways the document describes. I'm not asking you to take my word for any of this. I'm asking you to check it yourself, with whatever access to historical records and astronomical data you still have, before that access changes. Because I believe it is going to change soon. There is something moving in the corridor outside Navigation Bay 7. Slow, deliberate. A familiar sound of something that is searching and has not yet found what it is looking for, or something that has found it and is simply taking its time. I am not going to stop recording. I want to tell you about the last thing I found on Dr. Voss's slate. I said there were 417 frames. There are 417 frames of the map. But there is one more file on the slate, hidden in a partition within a partition. The kind of nested concealment that takes significant technical skill and significant anxiety to construct. A voice recording 47 seconds long, Dr. L.R. Voss, speaking in a whisper so low that I had to run audio enhancement twice before I could make out the words clearly. I am not going to play you the recording. I am going to tell you what she said. She said, "If you are hearing this, you found the compartment. Which means you are the kind of person who looks for the things that do not belong. Which means you are the kind of person I was. I want to tell you something that the map cannot show you. The map shows you what is coming. The map cannot show you what was here before it, before them, before the compromise, and the cascade, and the long patience of whatever waits in the outer dark. There is something else, something that the oldest records, the ones that predate 1630, the ones that predate the intervention as historical record, the ones that have been surviving in fragments and margins, and the spaces between officially approved texts for longer than any institution has been old enough to suppress them. Those records have a name for it. They call it the unmoving light. They describe it as something that exists at a frequency too deep for what is coming to access, too fundamental, too old. The entities in the outer dark consume resonance. They consume the frequency of belief and faith and hope directed at something. But there is a frequency of those things directed at nothing specific, not at a face, not at a structure, not at something that arrived. A frequency of trust without an object, hope without a destination. Faith that is not faith in something, but faith as a state of being. The records say they cannot touch it. They say it passes through whatever they are, the way light passes through glass. They say it does not feed them. It sustains something else. Something that has no face to show you because it has no interest in being seen, only in being. I do not know if any of this is true. I am a navigator. I find coordinates and plot courses. I am very bad at the part of this that requires belief without coordinates, but I am choosing to try, because the alternative is to stop, and I am not ready to stop. Find people who are not ready to stop. That is all the Manticore protocol I can offer you. Find people who are not ready to stop. End of recording. I have been sitting with those 47 seconds for a long time now. I think they are the most important 47 seconds I have ever heard. Not because they tell me anything I can verify. Not because they give me coordinates to plot a course toward. Because they give me something I did not expect to receive in the navigation bay of a damaged ship drifting in deep space, surrounded by things that should not exist, with a dying battery and a cracked data slate. They give me company. The specific company of someone who looked at the same impossible thing I'm looking at, and kept going anyway, not because they knew it was going to be all right. Not because they had a plan. Not because the mathematics resolved into something manageable, but because stopping felt like a worse answer than continuing. Voss was removed from the information environment approximately 27 months ago. She is gone in any physical sense, but the map is here, the recording is here. The 47 seconds of her voice in the dark of a hidden partition are here. And whatever she was pointing her signal toward when she made that recording, I find myself wanting to point mine at the same thing, not because I know it is there, because it is the direction that feels true. The sound in the corridor stopped, not moved away, stopped. The specific quality of stillness that follows something stopping is different from the quality of a corridor that was always empty. There is a weight to it. A held quality, like a breath being held on the other side of a door. I'm going to keep recording until the power in this bay drops below the minimum threshold for transmission. I want to use the time well. So let me tell you the things I believe, not the things I can prove. The things I hold onto in the readings make no sense, and the sounds in the walls start up again. And the forward array shows me something that my training insists cannot exist. I believe that consciousness is not a product of matter. I believe that matter is a product of consciousness. I believe that whatever is looking through the window of the observable universe at the coordinates Dr. Voss found is not looking at a resource. It is looking at a mirror. It is looking at something that reflects, imperfectly and briefly and briefly and beautifully, a quality that it possesses in infinite form. I believe that the entities coming through the door know this. I believe that what they are harvesting is not just the frequency of belief and hope and faith, but something more specific, the frequency of a mind that recognizes itself in something larger than itself. The frequency of the moment of connection. The moment when a 7-year-old boy sits under a planetarium dome and feels his father's hand on his shoulder and understands, without words, that he is part of something immeasurably old and immeasurably large. That moment, that is what they are here to eat. That is what they have been farming. And the way you protect it is not to stop having it, is not to close yourself against it, is not to armor the part of you that reaches toward whatever stands at the center of things. The way you protect it is to point it somewhere they cannot follow, at the unmoving light, at the thing that has no face, at the frequency too deep for consumption. At whatever it was that was present before the first cartographer looked at the right coordinates and understood that something was coming. It is still present. I can feel it at the edges of my perception, in the same way I can feel the cold through the hull plating, a quality that the cold is not, a quiet that is different from silence, a signal beneath the static. The power in Navigation Bay 7 is at 14%. I have a few minutes left in this transmission. I want to use them to say something I have not said in any of the previous logs. I want to say something to whoever is receiving these signals on the last frequency band. I do not know your name. I do not know your face. I do not know what you are carrying right now, or how heavy it has become, or whether you have anyone around you who knows what you know, but you are listening. In whatever circumstances brought you to this frequency, in whatever dark or quiet or lonely place you are in, when you hear these words, you chose to listen. That choice matters, not strategically, not tactically, not in the way of a plan that is going to prevent what is coming. It matters in the way that Dr. Voss's 47 seconds matter, in the way that a 7-year-old in a planetarium matters, in the way that one person, in the rubble of everything, pointing their signal at the right thing, matters. I do not know if it is enough. I am not certain enough is a category that applies to whatever is coming, but I know that the alternative is silence, and I am not ready to be silent. My name is Captain Arthur Vance, Commanding Officer of the Deep Space Research Vessel Manticore, the last uncompromised human mind in this portion of the solar system. And somewhere above me, in a navigation bay viewport stained with the light of 1,000 stars that were burning before the first human being looked up and wondered what they were. The stars are still there, still burning, still sending their ancient light in every direction, without preference or agenda or hunger, still present in a way that nothing can consume. The sound outside the door has started again. It is very close now. I want you to know that I am not afraid. I am not unafraid either. I am something that has no precise name yet. Something between those two states. Something that holds them both, without resolving into either. Maybe that is what the unmoving light feels like from inside it. Not the absence of fear. Not the triumph over fear. Just a simple, steady, continuing presence of a mind that has decided to keep going. One more breath, one more transmission, one more signal pointed at whatever is worth pointing at. Find people who are not ready to stop. That is the only protocol that matters now. Find them, hold your signal steady. Whatever descends in the days ahead, whatever voice speaks from whatever sky, remember that the oldest light is not the newest arrival. Remember that what has always been present does not need to announce itself. Remember Dr. Voss in a hidden compartment, finishing a map in the dark. Remember a boy under a planetarium dome, feeling the weight of something immeasurably old and immeasurably large. Remember that the antenna was built for something real, pointed there. Power at 6%. Closing transmission. Captain's log. Number 20. Captain Arthur Vance. Still here. End.